We're gonna watch an interview with the woman who has orchestrated the mass kidnapping of Ukrainian children. So this is oh God, I always forget her name. Maria Belova. I never can say her middle name. She has been organizing the mass kidnapping of Ukrainian children from Ukraine and deporting them forcefully to Russia. There is an arrest warrant out for her and Vladimir Putin for this crime issued by the ICC. There's been multiple UN reports published on this, multiple independent reports published on this, tons and tons of testimony from children who have returned. She has gone on TV and publicly bragged about adopting these children that were taken from Ukraine, while also claiming afterwards that they were totally going to return them. If you're going to return them, why are you adopting them? It doesn't really make much sense if you're adopting these children out while also claiming you're going to return them. There's been claims that children were abused at these facilities, and so Vice decided that they were going to do a sit-down interview with her. Now, I saw a few people that are mutuals of mine on Twitter from the Ukrainian space very angry that Vice did this interview. I disagree. I think interviews like this is fantastic, a fantastic way to bring attention to the issue, as well as show her position and then show how it contradicts with reality. If they do the interview correctly, I think you can interview and talk and debate anyone. Either of these things, interview, talk, debate to anybody, as long as you're prepared to do it and you do it in a responsible way. So the question is Vice going to do it in a responsible way and tackle this properly and not just give her a platform to say, oh yes, we are just so nice and we're taking these Ukrainian children and we're bringing them to Russia because we need to protect them from shelling, even though a lot of the reports we read earlier on when I talked about this on my channel is about how these orphanages that had Ukrainian children would basically have Russian soldiers go in there and loot them of all the children as they were about to evacuate from the Ukrainian army's advance. So the territory is about to be liberated and they go out and try to steal as many children as possible. And then we had the staff of these orphanages hiding these children in their homes, hoping that the Russian army doesn't find them and steal them away and steal a generation of Ukrainians from a country that's already suffering a demographic crisis, not only from the war, but just from the post-Soviet decline. From this, like, Ukraine's been having a demographic crisis ever since the Soviet Union collapsed. Anyway, let's watch this video. It's going to be very frustrating, I warn you in advance.
We can't actually believe that we are here in Moscow right now, following the arrest of the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was charged with espionage. We were expecting our visas to get rejected outright because it is just incredibly difficult to report here. We've managed to secure an exclusive interview with Maria Lvova-Belova, who is the President's Commissioner for Children's Rights. She has been charged with illegally deporting Ukrainian children to Russian territories.
Lvova-Belova is presented as a savior on Russian media. Close to President Putin, she's...
So it was this meeting specifically where she bragged about adopting multiple Ukrainian children that, again, were looted from Ukraine. And that's how I'm going to say it. Either kidnapped or looted. Not relocated.
Is presented as a savior on Russian media. Close to President Putin, she's seen as a hero who rescues abandoned children from the front lines. All this stokes pure fury in Ukraine, which was invaded by Russia last year and has since been on the receiving end of a deadly war. Now they say over 19,000 children have been abducted by this woman.
You are accused of war crimes. The US, the UK, the EU have all placed sanctions on you. The International Criminal Court has issued 2 arrest warrants for Russians, that is you and President Putin. They say there are reasonable grounds to believe that you bear criminal responsibility for illegally deporting and transferring children from Ukraine to Russia. Are you a war criminal?
Great opening question, by the way. Great opener.
Ukraine to Russia. Are you a war criminal?
Точно смешно.
That's very funny.
Я мать.
I am a mother.
Этим все
And that
сказано.
says it
Хуем.
all. Dude, okay, off to a terrible start. I am a mother. Oh, okay. If I know anything, it's that mothers cannot commit war crimes. Women, actually, it's impossible. In international law, it says if vagina, no war crime. I think that was like Article 8 of the Geneva Convention.
Военный преступник,
A
о чем
war
вы
criminal,
говорите?
what are you talking about?
Во-первых,
First of all,
юрисдикцию Международного
Russia
уголовного
doesn't
суда
recognize the jurisdiction of
Россия
the
не признает.
International Criminal Court. That is true. America doesn't as well. This is something we should recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. We should repeal the Hague Invasion Act. The Hague Invasion Act basically says that we could use any military force necessary to take Americans from the International Criminal Court, the ICC, in the Netherlands, if they were to try an American for war crimes. I think it's a terrible thing that we did. I think it's a terrible law. I think we need to repeal it. But whether or not Russia recognizes the jurisdiction of the ICC does not undermine the veracity or the legitimacy of the claims that they're putting forward. The claims of war crimes can 100% be on point that they're putting forward, even if you don't recognize their authority. For example, if I didn't recognize the authority of the Ukrainian police, if they caught me with, like, I don't know, like 100 pounds of marijuana, right? Even if I didn't recognize them, the evidence would be overwhelming, and I can not recognize them all I want, but they have the proof.
Уголовные
The criminal
преступления
offense
за
of
вывоз,
transportation,
как они называют,
so-called
депортации детей, да,
deportation of children, refers to forced
а на самом деле
deportation,
эвакуации
when in
из-под
fact it was
обстрела. Если мы с вами
evacuation from
вспомним
shelling.
Женевскую конвенцию,
First off, as I've already said, many of the children were stolen out of orphanages where they were safe, they were being taken care of by the people working at the orphanages, and they would send in soldiers to check these orphanages again and again and again to try to steal the children and take them back to Russia as they were getting pushed back by the Ukrainian army because they didn't want these orphans to be in Ukrainian-controlled territory. That's only one example. A lot of other examples of, children not really having much of a choice in their circumstances, then being deported to Russia and then not given an avenue to go back to Ukraine. According to the Geneva
то
Convention,
мы по
we
Женевской
can
конвенции
evacuate people,
можем эвакуировать
children,
людей, детей из
from
зон,
areas that threaten
где
their lives and safety.
для их жизни и здоровья представляется опасность.
Okay, orphanages are not in that list of things that threatens a child's safety, by the way. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, you need to give them a means to go back to their families, and you certainly cannot adopt them out to Russian families. You certainly cannot do that.
But the convention also goes on to say that if they need to be evacuated for safety reasons, they should be held in a third-party country.
Донецкая народная республика, Луганская народная республика, они не были...
Oh, that's such a bad excuse. I'm sorry, man. It's going to be very
Burns
hard
is an
for me to take
immoral,
this woman
morally
seriously.
corrupt,
It's going to be
bankrupt
very hard
man.
for me to take this witch seriously, okay? And she's literally, when I say that, I mean it in the most literal sense, because she's like the witch from like comic books. Like, I'm going to steal the child, like, unironically. Number one, the Donetsk and Luhansk governments are made up of two things: either literal criminals, as in gangsters and criminal elements that were recruited by the Russians, just like Yanukovych recruited the Tutushki thugs, and like former FSB agents and former government officials like Igor Girkin, who was the defense minister for the Donetsk People's Republic and helped organize the annexation of Crimea, including self-admittedly holding Crimean democratically elected politicians at gunpoint and forcing them to abolish the government. He admitted this on his radio show, which he admits a lot of things on, like rabid anti-Semitism. He's a very strange character. You should go watch his show if any of you actually speak the language, because he is such a character. But he's also brutally honest about his beliefs. Mr. Delight, thank you so much for the tier 1. So that's the first thing. They act as an extension of the Russian state that is not internationally recognized, and so no international body is going to say that occupied territory, and that's what it is, occupied territory, can act
Burns
as a third
is
party.
an immoral,
That's the first thing.
morally corrupt,
But let's
bankrupt
for a
man.
moment. Sean Cebu, thank you so much for the tier 1 and being sub for 8 months. And hey, if anybody else wants to drop some subs and donos, greatly appreciate it. You can go to site chat, DylanBurns.tv, drop some subs and donos, or you can do it in gutter chat because they've almost started a hype train. So let's for a moment say that there's some logic here that we need to abide by. Let's abide by her logic that Donetsk and Luhansk are actually legitimately could be considered third parties. They're not third parties to the war. They were at war with the Ukrainian government anyway, so even within this logic, still doesn't really make much sense, but let's ignore that for a moment. Russia annexed Donetsk and Luhansk to their own admission, like 8 months ago? It was like a big news story. They annexed Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. And they announced they were going to take the rest of these oblasts. And now the goal of the war was to capture what was left of those oblasts to capture. That was before the Kharkiv and then the Kherson counteroffensive, which then led to the Ukrainians retaking the only provincial capital that the Russians had captured for the entire war, the Kherson capital, and pushing them over to the Dnieper River. And they have made zero progress in capturing the city of Zaporozhye. They're never going to capture the city of Zaporozhye. I'm very confident in saying that affirmatively. They have yet to capture all of Donetsk. I mean, they almost captured all of Luhansk, but even that has been denied of them. There's still like 2% of it that isn't captured. So it's a participant in the conflict directly. It's not internationally recognized, and they already annexed it, so it doesn't even make sense in her own logic. I mean, but this is the problem, though. She is not in environments traditionally in the media space that will challenge her on these assertions. So when she says things like this, she's not used to getting challenged. So I don't think she's ever had to actually sit down and think this through.
Украиной. Они были признаны республиками независимыми нашим государством.
I guess a lot of the issues come from the difference in the definition of what Russia is and isn't, and who is Russian and who isn't.
Не поняла?
I don't understand.
The Russians now claim parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, as well as Donetsk and Luhansk. Russia no longer recognizes these areas or children living there as Ukrainian.
Some people would take this even further. You know, the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide says that forcibly transferring children of a group to another group when committed with intent to destroy a nation in whole or in part constitutes genocide. We know at this point that Russia does not want Ukraine to exist. So is this an act of genocide?
Как мы можем говорить о геноциде, если у нас часть людей
How can we
довольно
talk
большая
about genocide when quite a lot of
с
Russian
украинской
people
крови?
have Ukrainian
Какой
heritage?
геноцид?
What
О чем вы
genocide? What are you
говорите?
talking about?
Дети,
That's not even a response to the question. That's not a response to the kidnapping of children. That's not a response to the fact that the Russian government has said multiple times that Ukraine doesn't exist. It's an artificial state. We can go to Russian state TV and we could see them constantly talking about how they need to engage in the mass displacement, purposeful mass displacement of Ukrainian people. We have Russian government officials calling like Ukraine like a parasitic state. Like I think Dmitry Medvedev said it in one of his vodka-filled rants that he'll just randomly like tweet out on Twitter. Crazy that he still has a Twitter account, by the way. She doesn't want to respond to any of that. So she's just like, I don't know, some Russians were born in Ukraine. Nobody asked about that. Nobody asked if Russians were born in Ukraine. She's asking about genocide. That has nothing to do with it. That has nothing to do with, it's not even close to a response. Kids who arrive here with their parents and want to continue learning Ukrainian, we also provide them with that opportunity. There's not in a million years do I believe that when those Ukrainian kids get to Russia, there's like a little meeting where they sit down, they're like, okay, everybody can speak Ukrainian and everybody can speak Russian. We've got Ukrainian classes over there. We've got Russian classes over there. I don't believe that and will never believe that in a million years. This isn't about genocide. Regarding the UN, by the way, I love the standards for genocide according to the Russian government, because the Russian government claims that there is a genocide going on in Ukraine, but they claim it's against the Russian speakers, right? So they're very quick to throw out the accusation of genocide, and they throw this word out very quickly, but then when it's turned around on them, they don't even know what to say. It's like they don't even know the definition of the word. It feels like she's kind of just tiptoeing around it. They didn't respond to a single thing the vice reporter asked her. Regarding the UN, we presented our report at the UN Security Council, and it was a revelation to me that people who supposedly want to seek the truth did their best not to listen to one side of the argument. Okay, so what she's referring to here is that when she spoke, due to the fact that she's wanted by the ICC for kidnapping like 6,000 children, and that's like the bare minimum amount of children. The Ukrainian government alleges it's actually much more than that, but that's what is currently filed against her at the ICC. Due to her participation in that war crime, American government officials and a bunch of other government officials decided to walk out when Russia gave her the podium after Russia became chair of the UN Security Council. So I think it's pretty understandable why they wouldn't want to give her the time of day or the respect. I don't think it's about listening to her argument. If they want to go listen to her argument, they can just Google whatever she says on Russian state TV and listen to it there. It was about sending a message. It wasn't about listening to her side of the argument.
Обратную сторону.
Well, I think that they were just outraged that you were using the platform for disinformation and to spread lies.
Damn, I like how blunt the Vice News reporter here. I think they were just angry that you're a liar. I appreciate that bluntness. There's a lot of reporters who would not be that blunt. They think it's lies and disinformation.
Это понимание же их, правильно?
Correct?
У них же есть только
They only
одна
have one
сторона.
side.
Так надо послушать
You should listen to both sides of the story to get a full picture, right?
Правильно?
On Russian state media, smiling, joyful Ukrainian children are seen thanking Russian soldiers for saving their lives.
Thank you, Uncle Yuri, for saving me, my sister, and hundreds of thousands of... I'm sorry, dog. I can't read that without laughing. And hundreds of thousands of children in Mariupol. I'm sure that's what all the people of Mariupol are thinking now that the vast majority of the city, even according to the Russians, is no longer usable. Buildings burnt to the ground. I'm sure when the people left in Mariupol open their eyes and they see their old school burnt to the ground, they see their grocery store burnt to the ground, they see their home burnt to the ground, they see shallow graves throughout the entire city, graves so shallow that when artillery shells hit them, the bodies would then fly back up into the air because of how, I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at how dark that is. I'm laughing at the ridiculousness of the statement that they would be like, wow, thank you, Russia, for Mariupol. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's such a ridiculous statement. I have a hard time believing that the average Mariupol resident is that happy to see their city and home destroyed in that manner.
Mariupoля.
I mean, it's part of Russian military doctrine. It's just bomb everything until it stops moving. That's basically how they work. That's what they did in Chechnya. That's what they did in Mariupol.
Are these children being used as propaganda tools by the Russian state?
Благодарили бойцов за
They
спасение.
thank their soldier for saving
За то, что
them,
помогли,
for
за
not
то, что не
abandoning
оставили.
them.
За то, что...
Okay, so I have to bring this up because it's so, this is just so blatant. Do you guys remember the drama theater in Ukraine? And I know some of you will. It's really a sad incident. So the drama theater in Ukraine, there was a drama theater in Mariupol where they marked a theater with the words children very visible from the sky, civilians and children, and then the Russians bombed it anyway. It was very clearly indicated that it was a civilian location full of men, women, and children. Civilians, though, a lot of children, and they struck it, killed a ton of the civilians there, and then since then the Russians have done everything they can to cover it up. They clearly had a location marked for children. They bombed it, murdering the children. They can't take any of those kids and parade them around Moscow saying, look at them, we saved them all, because they're dead. And there's even some rumors, and we don't know for sure, that they've disposed of the bodies by literally just burying them under the building. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that them bombing the building and killing the civilians is true. And there's been multiple investigations and reports into this, and the evidence is overwhelming. for evacuating them from a war zone. Since when do our words of gratitude constitute propaganda?
One Ukrainian child featured prominently on Russian state TV is Philip, a 16-year-old kid from Mariupol, who Lvova-Belova has now fostered as her son. Mariupol was the site of one of the longest, bloodiest battles of the war so far.
Поэтому, что касается Филиппа, это произошло по зову сердца.
When it came to Philip, my heart called to him. He was in the group we evacuated from Mariupol after hostilities ceased.
Активных военных действий их нашли.
They were found inside basements. A group of 31 children.
В основном
They were
это были
mainly
подростки.
teenagers.
И мы с ним разговорились,
We
и,
talked to
знаете, сердце
Philip, and my
ёкнуло, я
heart
поняла,
fluttered,
что
and
это
I
Мария.
realized that he was my
Что
child
касается-
dog. I couldn't imagine, because this is the equivalent of me going into somebody's city, murdering. Dude, this is like me going into somebody's home, murdering their entire family, and then finding like a baby in the cradle. It's like, oh my God, it was meant for me. I am the guardian angel, here to save this little darling. It's so unbelievably hideous.
Его нахождение в
As
нашей
far as him
семье,
and our
это всегда
family,
непростая ситуация.
it's
когда
always
ты
a
берешь
tricky
приемного ребенка,
situation when you
совершенно
foster a
неважно,
child,
откуда
no
он.
matter where he's
Поэтому в
from.
протяжении года,
That's why over
пока
the
у
year
нас Филипп
Philip has been
находится,
with
у нас
us,
эта адаптация
we've been
происходила.
adapting.
Мы безумно друг друга
We
любим,
love each
это
other
факт.
madly. That's a fact.
Филипп называет меня
He
сейчас
calls me
мамой,
mom now.
и у нас действительно
We
очень близкие
really have
отношения
a
с ним.
close relationship.
In the case of Mariupol, where your son is from, this was being surrounded and sieged by the Russians. There were Russian bombs falling on those children. And so, to present yourselves as a savior right now,
Yes.
you can understand why the
question.
international community is concerned about that.
Украина ничего не сделала
Ukraine has
для
done nothing
эвакуации
to evacuate
детей с
children
территории.
from Mariupol. I have talked to multiple people who were involved in evacuating children from Mariupol. There were people evacuating children from Mariupol, aid workers, local humanitarians who were engaged in that. Even interviewed somebody who was involved with that. That isn't released on the channel yet. That will probably be released on my main channel, Dylan Burns TV, which I just released a new video on Dylan Burns TV where I interviewed a foreign legionnaire. Fantastic in-depth interview. One of the most in-depth interviews I've ever had. I've only released the first part. Second part's coming out soon. You should go check it out. But they were engaged in evacuations from Mariupol. But the problem was that the setting up of humanitarian corridors from Mariupol was extremely difficult because humanitarian corridors just seem to keep combusting randomly.
О чем тогда мы можем
What is there to
говорить?
talk about?
Где были
There were no
гуманитарные
humanitarian
коридоры? Где была
corridors.
эвакуация
No one
детей?
evacuated the
То же
children.
самое сейчас
The
происходит
same
под
is happening
Бахмутом.
near Bakhmut now.
Когда мы вот сейчас с
My
моим...
staff and I,
с
by the
моим-
way, there's tons of footage online of people from Bakhmut being evacuated by even the Ukrainian military itself. Not even a lot of times aid workers. I mean, there is evacuations going on in Mariupol. There's still people in Mariupol, which is not Mariupol. I mean Bakhmut, which is insane to think about. It's unbelievably insane to think that there's still people living in the city. But some people just have nowhere else to go.
моими
My
сотрудниками
staff and I just recently
вывозили оттуда
evacuated
семьи с
families with
детьми.
children from there.
Мы спасали
We were
детей.
saving children.
Мы вывозили
We
их туда,
took them
где
to
они
places where
выживут
they can survive
и будут в
and be
безопасности.
safe.
Ukraine disputes that humanitarian corridors could be established safely. Lvova-Belova says the only option is to bring these children to safer places in Russia. She's utilized Russian summer camps stretching
What is this? A singer from Moscow recorded a music video on the roof of the ruined drama theater. About 600 people died here when the Russian... Oh my... Dude, I'm gonna actually become Russophobic. I need to not watch this. I need to, like, stop myself. That's so bad. Okay, let's continue. Oh my god, that is horrific.
safely. Lvova-Belova says the only option is to bring these children to safer places in Russia. She's utilized Russian summer camps stretching from Crimea, which Putin annexed in 2014, all the way to eastern Siberia. Vice News has spoken to mothers who say they were deceived or coerced into parting with their children.
Think about it, right? Your city is getting bombed. The Russians come to you. They say, don't worry, we'll take your children. You'll get them back super quick. The next thing you know, your child's in Siberia and they're being taught Russian, being punished for speaking any Ukrainian Oh my god, dog. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's such a ridiculous situation to have this woman sitting in front of the vice reporter saying, "We're the heroes, we came to save the children. We just had to bomb their homes, okay? We needed to relieve them of their city."
Not knowing how long they'd be gone.
We visited a camp this week on the outskirts of Moscow, where some of the smartest kids had been taken from areas that are newly controlled by Russia. They were given excursions to the Red Square. They learned about career opportunities here in Russia. They were getting Russian passports. Is the goal with these kids to encourage them, some people would say indoctrinate, but to encourage them to stay in Russia?
Так эти дети уже в России.
Kids are already in Russia.
Это дети
These kids
из тех регионов,
are from regions
которые
that
признали
declare
себя
themselves
Россией.
Russian. They didn't declare themselves Russian. Kherson never declared itself Russian. They invaded. Okay? Zaporozhye never declared itself Russian. They invaded. In Donetsk and Luhansk, they were Russian military. In Donetsk and Luhansk, even admitted by Putin in 2015, like 8 years ago, after they were captured by Kiev. They funneled weapons into the region. Like, these are all areas that they invaded and tried to conquer. They didn't just declare themselves randomly Russian. There's nothing to encourage here. It is true that several thousand children were sent to these camps by agreements with their parents. It was absolutely voluntary. From bombarded districts of Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Kharkiv. And when parents were offered the chance to send them on a free vacation, of course everyone happily agreed. I'm sorry, man. But oh my god, I've never had so much burning rage for a single human being in my life. This is so bad. Free vacation. They take your child after destroying your city and bombarding it, saying this is the only way your child will survive. And in a desperate attempt to make sure your child literally doesn't blow up, you hand them to the Russians who tell you you'll get them back just like that. You go back to Kiev. They go to Siberia, where they're then abused and told if you show any pro-Ukrainian sympathies, you will be severely punished. If you do not speak Russian and sing Russian, you will be severely punished. And that's a free vacation? Their city was burnt to the ground. Oh my god, this is such a bad human being. I've never, I try to believe that there's redeemable qualities in every human being. I think we found somebody who has zero redeeming qualities. My goodness. Then there was a shift in the front line. And some of the parents stayed on the Ukrainian side. And that made it difficult to take the children home.
As the front lines have shifted, some Ukrainian mothers have been granted permission to travel to Russia to reunite with their children after months of separation.
There are some Ukrainian children who are now back in Ukraine who say that during that time in some of these camps, they experienced psychological abuse. They say that they were forced to sing Russian songs and that if they expressed any pro-Ukrainian sentiments, they were punished for that. Is that true?
Но в этом наша разница с Украиной.
That's where we differ from Ukraine. We don't use children for political purposes, but unfortunately Ukraine does. But
On Russian state media, smiling, joyful Ukrainian children are seen thanking Russian soldiers for saving their lives.
Dude, they're not even trying. Zero effort. Zero effort. She's been comforted by a Russian media environment that punishes dissent. She doesn't have to deal with critique. She doesn't even think about the words she says before she says them.
Разница с Украиной. Мы не используем детей для политики. Там, к сожалению, это происходит.
As Children's Rights Commissioner, I can't ignore that. We're investigating their claims, even though it's absurd. Even though the accusations are fake, I still respond. I like how it's... Obviously, these claims are crazy, but we're still investigating them. Anyway, they're fake. if you're investigating them, then how do you know if they're fake or not? You can't say you're investigating something and then declare it fake.
Я все равно среагировала и направила
And alerted all the investigative bodies.
So you're saying that these kids who experienced the camp for themselves are lying about their experiences?
That's a great question.
А как бы вы поступили?
What would you do if you were in a place where that was expected from you?
Где вы понимаете,
Where your
что
family
твоя
lives in one of the
семья
special
живет
centers for
в
evacuees.
специальных
She's not responding to the question. It's just a pivot.
центрах для
She doesn't want to call the child a liar.
И как ты можешь
How
не
can you
подтвердить ту
not say
информацию,
what's demanded from
которую
you?
от тебя ждут?
I mean, you say that you're not indoctrinating or brainwashing these children in any way, but do you not feel like, people might feel pressure to support Russia, given that, I mean, you're literally working for the Russian government, you yourself are close to the president, and there's a lot of, obviously, it's pro-Russian sentiment here.
Конечно.
Of course. I'm a member of my beloved president's state. Oh my God. That can't be direct. That can't be a direct translation. I'm surely a patriot of my country.
Патриот своей страны.
And I'm not pro-Russian.
Не то, что пророссийская, я российская.
I'm Russian in its purest form.
Виде. Поэтому
Our
мне
aim is
кажется,
to
что
keep
наша сейчас задача разделить
the fraternal bonds between us and our
наши
brotherly
отношения
people.
с
Dog. Okay, I have a brother. I have a brother, and I love my brother a lot. Okay, but if I went up to my brother and beat the crap out of him, saying, love me, love me, love me, love me, I'd be arrested, and for good reason.
братским нам народом.
Last year, you asked President Putin to sign a decree that streamlined the process of getting some children Russian passports. Can you understand, the argument that...
Again, if it's just taking them and evacuating them to be in a safer location, again, they're not supposed to do it. It's supposed to be a third party anyway. They're already breaking the law here. Her justification of Donetsk and Luhansk makes zero reason, especially since they already annexed that under their own laws, under their own constitution. 1 second. I lost my train of thought. I'm feeling so much rage I can't even think, actually.
Children Russian passports.
But the Russian passports, if she's trying to streamline Russian passports, then it's not just about evacuating them out of this territory, it's about making them Russian.
You understand, the argument that getting these kids Russian citizenship could be seen as a form of wiping out their identity and as a form of ethnic cleansing.
Гражданство
They
Украины
still have
остается
Ukrainian
живым.
citizenship.
Мы же его
We are
не
not
отменяем.
canceling it.
Мы не
We are not
заменяем.
replacing
Мы
it.
дополняем и
We are
даем возможность.
supplementing it and providing an
стирание
opportunity.
идентичности?
What is it? Identity stretching?
Когда,
I'm
я
sure
уверена,
there are
что в
many
вашем
people in
окружении
your
есть много
community
людей, у
who have
которых
dual
два гражданства.
citizenship.
Есть?
Aren't there?
Well, I would say it's a
Нет,
different
есть или
situation.
нет?
Are
I would
there?
say it's a slightly different situation when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, given that there's a very active conflict going on right now.
Нет, подождите,
No,
а как?
wait, how?
Как гражданство
How can
может стереть
citizenship erase
идентичность?
identity?
Мы всегда
The Russians have forced citizenship on a lot of people in Ukraine. For example, the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant staff, they will go to them and say, you will get the citizenship, or you could be subject to either losing your job, or you could be subject to legal repercussions. There's even some situations where if you don't take the citizenship, recently there's been reports about possibly those who do not accept citizenship, possibly even being like just drafted. Like there's a lot of penalties that are coming with it. This is as a way of you accepting the occupation, accepting your new quote unquote overlords, and them then being able to take all these people accepting Russian citizenship to say, here, look, they're becoming Russian citizens. They support Russia. If they didn't support Russia, why would they become Russian citizens? But they're making it so that there's every incentive in the world for them to take that citizenship and what resources they provide them in a war-torn country, and make it so there's penalties for not accepting that Russian citizenship.
пели песни
It's my
на
motherland,
русском,
and we
украинском
also sang
языке.
songs in Russian
Мы
and Ukrainian.
рассказывали
Also,
сказки.
Ukraine doesn't allow dual citizenship, which is a problem, obviously. We told Russian and Ukrainian fairy tales. We always lived in friendship and understanding. Dude, they lived in so much friendship and understanding when the Russian Tsardom was literally banning the Ukrainian language. Always. Never a single conflict. What's happening now is different. In Ukraine, they erase everything related to Russia.
Do you ever have any doubts that you're doing the right thing?
When it came to the decisions we made in the moment, I can assure you that politics were not involved. We were led by compassion, love. They were love bombs, love bullets, love war crimes. That Izium mass grave, it was made of over 440 bodies, but more importantly, love. And that's why I can say I'm not ashamed or of anything I've done. All this has been done for the sake of the children. I had to bomb them for the sake of the children, shoot them for the sake of the children, kill them for the sake of the children. She's going to hell. I have nothing else to say about this video. She's going to hell. She's going to burn in hell. She's going to hell.